Spookyou's frightening nights of Halloween.
Hello, my dear Franken friends, and welcome to Spookyu, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen, and I hope you wiped your feet at the door. I may be furry and monstrous, but I still hold myself to a certain standard of living, you know. For if we don't practice simple hygiene, are we truly anything more than the mindless masses that wander the waste, scrounging for food and terrorizing the nearby villages? Sorry. I've got some deeply rooted issues that I'm still working out. On to tonight's lineup. We've got two very talented narrators gracing your screens tonight. Innocence Unknown and the Weekly Creeps. You know, moderator of chats and purveyor of frights, or something like that. He slipped me a 20 with a hastily scrawled note, and it's a little hard to read. We'll just go with that. Next up are the authors that make all of this possible. Innocence Unknown. Wait a minute. He wrote the story that he's reading. I'm fairly certain that's a breach of contract. Hold on. I'm getting a telepathic message from one of the great old ones that heads our legal department. Guess I should have read the fine print. Oh well. Next up is Lady Pingoria of Spookaria. Spookaria. Sorry, I was momentarily possessed by the soul of Lucid Lupus.
Number 4, Michelle Obama.
And finally, HaileyAlizabeth to wrap things up. Now let's go ahead and dive into tonight's first story. The Lady in the Kitchen, written and narrated by Innocence Unknown.
When I was young, I lived with my parents and older sister in a trailer home on a plot of land behind my grandparents' house, which was no kidding, a large 2-story pink house out in Galveston County, Texas. Behind the properties was a family with their own U-Haul rental business and their house. The family was a wife, 2 daughters, and a husband. Now, I won't be naming any names except one, the husband. There was a man named Timothy Gribble. Now, Timmy here was a convicted murderer. He strangled and raped 2 women. He was given the death penalty and executed back in 2000. I lived in the trailer up until my 4th grade year, and then ended up moving to the pink house to house sit it for my grandparents as they moved to a new home for retired folks. Now, I am mainly just trying to at least place the setting. Perhaps it will help to bring some understanding as to what I experienced over the years on these properties. Even when I was a kid and moved into the pink house or even visiting, I always felt off being there, like something was just not right. Nothing really happened though until I was in the 6th or 7th grade. First, it was a weird thing with the front door. It would just open on its own. At first, it would just open slowly and stay open. Easily explainable, right? Door unlocked, old house, town sitting on a fault line, so the foundation wasn't exactly the best. That never really weirded me out. No, what was weird was one night, around 8 or 9 p.m., I was just watching TV in the living room, and the door just opened and closed itself quickly, twice. Didn't creep me out right away because I figured, oh, it's just my cousin. He said he was coming to pick up an inhaler for my mother as they were both asthmatics. He was known to be a little jokester towards me, so whatever. I will just see if it was him. I looked outside and my driveway was empty. I asked my mother if he had just came in, and she said no. So I put it out of my mind and moved on. Fast forward further down the road, I laid down for bed and I started hearing this faint noise, like a hand faintly pounding on the wall or floor. From there on, I would hear this every night. I disregarded it since no one else could hear it, and said I was just imagining it. It bothered me for a while, and then I just accepted that it won't go away, and I will just once again move on. Figured if there is something, it's just doing its thing, and as long as it left me alone, I would leave it alone. Then the night I actually saw something. I couldn't explain, and to this day, my family swears I just imagined it. It was around 3 a.m. I was in the living room playing a video game on the TV. So I go to the kitchen to get a drink, and I look across the room and there was a figure standing there, and I froze. My dining room kitchen is a bit large. I was standing at the entrance next to the staircase, looking across the dining room past the bar into the kitchen, and the figure was a woman. She was a slim build, wearing a long nightgown, and well, had no head. Now there wasn't a bloody stump where the neck was, just there was no head. As I said, I froze. I wasn't truly scared, just unsure how to react, and just wasn't processing what I was seeing. I turned around, went back in the living room, and sat down, and was confused. I kept thinking about it and pondering, did I really see that? Was that real? So I got up and went back in there. She was still there, never moved, just standing there. I went back in and out several times and she did not leave. I finally said, okay, you stay there. I don't care, do what you do. And I'm going to my room and going to sleep. No response, not even a wave, nothing. So I went to bed, laid there all night until 6 a.m. terrified, wondering, what if she comes up into my room? Thankfully, that was the last I saw her. But there were other experiences that happened in the house, and even at my old trailer home. A couple weeks after that, we were doing some remodeling work in my room. So I wound up having to sleep a few nights in my parents' room on the floor. As was every night, the faint pounding noise continued. Again, I would ignore it and just sleep. But that night, the noise grew louder each time. It stayed faint, but grew slightly louder each time. I would ask the parents, "You hear that?" And they would say, "No, of course they didn't." As it continued, it finally just stopped for a little while. It was oddly quiet. I figured, okay. Finally, guess it got tired. After about 10 or 15 minutes, something slammed into my parents' closed door to the room. Hard. It sounded like someone just ran head first into it, and trust, it was loud. I sat up and said, okay. I know I was not the only one who heard that. The parents agreed. My father and I checked the whole house, even our attic, which is not a place you really want to go into since the house was so old. Nothing. No one was there but us. The noise went back to its faint self that night after that. To this day, I think about it all the time. I have had other things happen, but these two events stick out all the time, and I just still don't know what to think about them. I don't know if this woman in the kitchen was a victim of that Gribble guy, or if someone else. I just don't know. Hell, I wish I actually had some evidence to even prove it all happened. Either way, it happened, and I guess nothing else I can say there. Some days, I wish I did imagine it all.
Nicely done, Innocence Unknown. You guys ready to hear a bit about this incredible narrator? There's a lot of versatility here, because not only does this narrator, well, narrate, but he's also a Twitch streamer. On his channel, you'll find creepy stories, discussions of the paranormal and other creepy things around the world, as well as uploads from his Twitch channel. By the way, if you'd like to watch him live, you can find him on Twitch at Innocence_Unknown. Be sure to follow him on Twitter while you're at it, at in_unknown. Links are in the description. And since this guy went above and beyond and wrote his own story, we'll skip the author segment on this one. If you'd like to pretend that we didn't just do that, you can back the video up about 30 seconds to have your own author segment. Our next story is Just One Bite. Written by the Scream Queen herself, Lady Spookaria, and narrated by the wondrous Weekly Creeps.
Just one bite. Just one bite. I promised myself that I would stop at one. One victim, one bite. Yet, we don't always keep the promises we make. I stared down at you, lying hopelessly on the ground. The wound on your neck is fresh. I could even see the marks made with my teeth. I could hear the frantic heartbeat as the blood began to seep from the wound. The pulsing was becoming weaker. The stream of blood was slowing down, and I knew that she was on death's door. Her heart was weak. My hand reached out timidly at first, as though to try to feebly stop the blood in a lazy attempt to preserve her life. I knew I should do this. Why was the art of killing so intoxicating? It was better than anything else. Drugs? Perhaps this was mine. Sex? I had never reached my peak like I have when I bite my prey. The first bite is always the best. It was supposed to be my last. Instantly, I felt the warmth of the liquid compared to the coolness of her skin. Her auburn hair now dark with blood. She barely made a sound other than a small whimper. Taken by surprise, she did not have a chance to fight nor flee. Instead, her eyes gazed up at me in awe, confused and desire. I turned to my hand so I could look at my fingertips. The telltale color of blood. My senses were heightened. The two most intoxicating things were the scent and the taste. As though driven by a spell, my fingers soon entered my mouth. I sucked the blood hungrily from them. Again, once I had the taste, I could not stop myself and knelt in the spilled blood. My arms wrapped around her dying form, and she reached up to touch my face. I don't know if she was thanking me for ending her suffering or trying to prevent me from feasting on her neck. My hand rested on top of hers for a moment. Her jade-colored eyes studied mine, searching, desperately seeking something that I could not decipher. I took her gently by the chin, turned her head to the side to expose her soft and marked neck to me. I leaned. Blood and the metallic fragrance filled my nostrils with an ancient desire. Lips parted, and I sucked the blood from her as the life finally left her. I was still ravenous for more, and I had wasted far too much of her blood. I drank hungrily, taking in mouthfuls of the rich liquid, swallowed and gulped it down more. Finally, her body was drained and I released her. The drained body slumped downwards, lifeless. I looked down at her before guiltily closing her eyelids. Those green eyes will forever haunt me, much like all the others do when I am not on the hunt. My hunger has not stopped. My hunt continues. I stepped out of the secluded alleyway. The people on the busy streets did not notice the deceased woman nor the blood on my lips. They likely thought it was lipstick. My footsteps joined the rest of the people's. I could hear snippets of their conversations and took glimpses into their lives. Talk of their families, friends, highs and lows. It was all idle chatter. My hands trembled as I felt the sensation rise inside of me again. My eyes darted around. Finding the ideal prey was the most time-consuming part. They needed to be easily forgotten. Someone whose society could not excuse mistreatment or possibly blame for being harmed. I loathe myself for thinking like this. I'm a good person. I just have a condition that makes me do this. I can't help it. I see someone. She is walking alone, head down, and occasionally looking over her shoulder. Behind her was a suitcase being dragged along the ground behind her. Perhaps she was a runaway, or a traveler? I moved through the crowd. All of them were so focused on their phones, conversations, or where they were going. They never realized that a monster moved amongst them. My instinct was to drag her in the darkness of the alleyway and begin my feast. It was easy to forget the fact that she was a person. We walked past one another. My senses became alive and saliva pooled in my mouth. Yet, there were people in that particular alleyway. I didn't want to have to kill too many. Excuse me. The words snapped me out of my thoughts. I looked down to see my potential victim looking up at me. The first time a victim ever spoke to me. I raised my eyebrows at her in an invitation for her to continue speaking. She was nervous, fidgeting, and I'm assuming she had run out of options. "Do you know where the bus stop is?" she asked. I studied her eyes. They were bloodshot and inflamed. There were heavy black bags under her pretty brown eyes. These were telltale signs of crying and sleepless nights. I smiled at her, just like I had been practicing in the mirror for decades. It looked less like a sneer and closer to a smile. Just around the corner, up that way, I answered, lazily pointing my hand, only to realize at that last moment that my hand was still covered in blood. I brought it down quickly and hid it. Fortunately, she didn't notice. I could hear her heartbeat and had to restrain myself from feasting in the middle of the street. It was difficult. The pulsing was intoxicating. An animalistic drive filled me, one that I struggled to contain every day. I looked past her into the reflection in one of the storefronts. I was average, bordering on handsome. I looked normal. From the outside, no one could tell what I truly was. No one could see the beast within. "Do you need help?" I asked. The human part of me still wanted to help her. If one monster noticed her, surely others would have as well. And this time, I would ensure she got to safety. She looked at me with relief. Her hopeful expression lit up to one of happiness, and I felt a pang of guilt in the pit of my stomach. This is why you're not supposed to speak to your prey. I reached into my coat pocket and fiddled with the archaic cross, a gift from my grandmother long ago, when I was still human. "Yes, I ran away from home to move in with my boyfriend," she began, embarrassed and glinting down towards the ground. "Things didn't work out and I'm trying to make my way back home." I wanted her to get home to her family. I forgot about the park on the way to the bus stop. The streetlights had turned on, and during the course of the events, I had forgotten the time. The urges were more difficult to stop during the nighttime. The instincts became stronger. She relaxed around me as we walked down the pathway towards the bus stop. I was her protector, and perhaps this was my redemption? It was getting colder. Condensation came from her breath as she shivered. I wanted to keep her warm. My skin no longer had warmth of its own. That time had long passed. "Are you cold?" I asked, as I removed my coat instinctively and forgot about the blood. She couldn't see it anyway. She smiled, nodded, and accepted while I draped it around her shoulders. I could see the goosebumps on her neck, and with a groan I turned and looked away as her heartbeat got louder. "Thank you," she answered, her voice soft and gentle. I was distracted by the beauty of the night. At least, that was what I told myself. As I looked up at the sparkling stars, my eyes were able to pick up more than a human's could, and noticed her shrink away from me. Her eyes filled with anger and fear. She had every right to do so, yet I could not escape why. My coat. The coat was still wet with blood. I can explain," I began. I wanted to tell her I wasn't a monster. It wasn't my fault. To plead with her to listen to me. She opened her mouth to scream, and I couldn't have that. Swiftly, I leapt forward, grabbing her tightly and put my hand over her mouth to prevent her from screaming. The whimpers of just fear she made, the warmth of her skin, the blood in her veins. Slowly, I felt my resolve decline. The hunger took hold and my fangs sank deep into her neck. It is always how it starts. Just one bite.
Now let's learn a little bit about Weekly Creeps, shall we? I'd love to tell you a little bit about him, but he's recorded a promo for you guys, so I'll let him handle that. Here he is! Sounds like Weekly's experiencing some technical difficulties. So let me take it from here, and we'll check back on him in a few. He's got a number of awesome narrations for you to dive into on his channel, and I seem to recall a live stream at one point, yes? Not only that, but I hear he's currently dabbling in animation and honing his skills, so I'm excited to see what's gonna come of that. Oh, and I'm sure you've seen him around, moderating some chats here and there for a few fellow narrators. Talk about a jack of all trades. Now let's check back in on Weekly and see how he's doing. Alright, well, glad to see he's doing alright. Weekly is amazing, and you should get to know him on Twitter at Weekly Creeps. I promise, he doesn't bite. Even if the story he just narrated might suggest otherwise. Oi, would you look at there? A prime lady Spookaria in her natural habitat. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the guttural screams of fuck as she has to restart her recording for the 8th time. Here, let's get a little closer. Uh-oh, she spotted us, and she's not too thrilled that we've interrupted her narration ritual. In all seriousness, you guys know her, you love her, it's the nuggie queen of the damned, Lady Spookaria. Check out her channel for live streams, the Harper Codex, original stories, and more. And be sure to keep up with everything she's doing over on Twitter at Lady Spookaria. Links in the description below. Our final story of the night is The Hunter, written by HaileyAlizabeth and narrated by our vivacious voiceover virtuoso. It was already very late when Derek arrived home from his week-long hunting trip. The neighborhood was quiet, and no one heard their neighbor arriving home. None of them had even noticed that he'd been gone. Derek wasn't exactly social, and it was very rare for any of his neighbors to see him coming or going. It had been a very successful hunting trip. Perhaps the most successful he'd had all year, which was especially good, as winter would be here soon, and Derek needed a store of meat to make it through. Once the snow started falling, he wouldn't have a chance to hunt again until late spring or summer. After ensuring that his garage door was closed completely, Derek began the process of unloading his kill. Shortly after moving in, he had built himself an enclosed area in the back of his garage, equipped with everything he would need to butcher and preserve the meat. As he hauled the carcass out of the back of his truck, Derek took a moment to admire the head. It was a beautiful specimen, and not for the first time, he considered taking up taxidermy in his spare time. She would certainly look quite nice above his mantle. The butchering process was almost meditative for Derek. He spent much of the time thinking about mundane tasks he needed to get done around the house or projects at work. But his favorite thing to think about was the meals that he would make. His mouth watered at the thought of the stew, ribs, and chili that would feed him through the winter. Perhaps he would even make some jerky to snack on. Once everything was portioned out, Derek marked each package with all of the important details: name, cut, and date, and loaded the packages into a box to transport them to the freezer in the kitchen. The moment Derek entered the house, he knew something was off. The rank, pungent smell hit him as soon as he opened the door. Walking through the house toward the kitchen, the smell only intensified so much that Derek felt as though he could hardly breathe. When he turned the corner into the kitchen, the cause of the offending smell was obvious. The freezer door sat slightly open. Everything inside had thawed and completely rotted in the week that he had been gone. Trying not to retch, Derek took one of the packages marked Christine, Shank, 8/15/20, and unwrapped the butcher paper. If the smell hadn't already been enough to make him sick, the maggots did it. Another package marked Jessica, ribs, 9/12/20, was the same. 2 hunts completely gone to waste. Derek sullenly emptied the freezer of all of the rotten meat. It was lucky that there were still a couple of weeks left before the snow would come. He would have to go hunting again. These 50 or so pounds of Rachel definitely wouldn't last him all winter. What an awesome story, Haley. She did such an incredible job on the pacing of this story and hiding her hand up until the final reveal. If you enjoyed this story, then you're in luck because she's writing a brand new horror story every single day in October. You can read them all on her subreddit at r/HaileyWritesHorror. There's so many great stories for you to get lost in, so be sure to join her subreddit and follow her Reddit profile to stay up to date with everything that she's doing. And that's gonna wrap things up for us tonight, my darling deviants. Thank you so much to the narrators and authors that lent their talents to this video, and be sure you devour the links in the description to check out each and every one of them. This wouldn't be possible without all of their hard work. Now tomorrow we'll be back again at the same time with more narrators and authors to satiate that horrific appetite of yours. Smash that thumbs up, annihilate that subscribe button, and ring that little bell while you're at it. Until next time, my ghastly gang, stay spooky.